Hello, my dear friends. How is it going? I'm Mari Theriger, and here we are once again at that time of the year. The end draws near. It is the end of another year, another cycle, and there's plenty of activities to keep your mind busy to avoid dwelling for too long on certain thoughts that are much more active and running through our minds this time of the year, which often prevents us from carrying on. Today, I'm here to talk about the custom of walking around a church as an activity we come about in traditional folk magic, as a performance to acquire magical power, mostly related to enhancing one's abilities to see the future for divinatory purposes, right? I've touched on this subject before on the video I've done about acquiring magical power, the act of circumambulation as a performance to acquire magical power, of course, precisely. We are talking about the combination of both performing a ritual at a particular powerful time of the year, joining it with a specific place understood to have a certain spiritual and or magical power or potency. Deliberate circumambulation of church or home. I've also touched on this subject when I did a video about årsgång, the Swedish equivalent of this act of circumambulation, known as walking the year's walk, at gå årsgång, which consists of the circumambulation of a building or area or church or home in a prescribed manner, after which divinatory or healing powers were bestowed upon the person that did this performance. The procedure of walking or running counterclockwise about the church or home in order to see portents in the windows afterwards was a common method of divination. It was, still is, common that on some foreboding and auspicious days to run a prescribed number of times counterclockwise around the house or the church in order to know the future events. It is also used to obtain magical power, as I said. In some cases, it becomes a ritual performance every year for 7 to 9 years, not failing one single year until it is awakened magical potency within the person that never fails to do this performance by the end of each year. Usually during prominent holidays, specific religious days at the final month of the year, or indeed at the very last day of the year. The ritual of walking around a particular place of power within traditional folklore is usually done at midnight on special holidays, such as Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve. This same procedure, with the substitution of the parish church for the residence, one's residence, is often mentioned as one method to conjure the devil in order to obtain lasting magical power. Not the Christian devil per se, but the folklore devil, right? The entity who holds a particularly important power sought by those within the craft, and with whom a relationship is created in order to enhance one's abilities. A spiritual potency, a wild force that dwells betwixt and between all things. Well, let us develop a little bit more on this. My dear friends, if you please. One of the popular sorcerers and witches' customs of divination is done by going around a particular place of power, a monument deemed to be charged with magical potency and spiritual power. Times change, but certain customs remain, and people adapt to their new circumstances. That's what witchcraft has been, traditional folk magic. Adaptation to evolve and becoming, which is why it survives longer than any spirituality or religion. So, an ancient church has become the central point of power for the act of circumambulation, the act of going around a place charged with magical force for the conjuration of spirits that can assist in matters of magic, especially to obtain magical and healing powers. As said before, initiations with the witch's devil itself, which can take place in circles, reciting the Lord's Prayer backwards around the church. The church has been, for a long time, a substitute for other places that were once understood as being charged with spirits and energetic powers of creation. Circumambulation is an ancestral method to acquire magical power as well as to contact with spirit entities. It is one of the performances in necromancy of old as well, to go around burial mounds, tombs, and the places of the dead in order to contact ancestral spirits for divinatory purposes. Such performances and places were at some point prohibited with time, in some countries even prohibited by secular and religious laws. Such is the case of Iceland, of which I've also talked about in here on another video, about other similar performances. But as I said in the previous video, folklore is living memory, and some customs are not so easily destroyed, to the point that even Catholic priests still nowadays perform these activities around ancient megalithic monuments, a performance for the local community in some rural areas of European countries. Such is the case of my own country, here spoken on the previous video. Today, in folklore and traditional witchcraft, these performances continue to be done. Many of these customs have, for many centuries, been around a church, understood to be the home of many spirits, and spirits that can be consulted for revealing things about the future, conjuring a spirit through prayers, summons, and offerings of bread and wine at the church door. This is one of the places of power for performing magical acts. But we are not just talking about a replacement of the place of power due to the changes in customs and belief systems. Precisely due to these changes, many populations over several generations have become much more connected to these religious spaces. As such, the belief continues in the power that the spirits of the dead possess, just like the spirits of our ancestors as well. For many generations, our ancestors were Christians, especially speaking of those closest to us and also those we have known and have actually met. As such, ancestors are very much connected to their ways of life prior to their passing and change of body, change of existence. Ancestors are, like us, conscious persons who remain for a long time linked to the ways of life they knew, and as such have a tendency to stay in or visit places that were known and important to them. Hence, the church has become an important center of power and congregation of ancestral spirits. And for this reason, the focus is shifted to this place of power in traditional witchcraft in order to conjure such spirits, such persons. I've developed a little bit more on this subject about the ancestors in my most recent video in the White One series, where perhaps, and I hope, you can better understand what I'm saying here about the ancestors and their tendency to stay attached to their previous ways of life. The important aspect to take into account in here, at least I find it important, is that many of our ancestors are really still very much connected to their past lives and even to thoughts and habits and ways of being. Therefore, for the most part of us, Europeans at least, our ancestors, even ourselves, we grew up within a Christian religious system. Hence, the church continues to be a point where many of our ancestors sometimes return to at auspicious times of the year. And it is there that, through varied rituals, we can conjure them. Churches become places where many generations of people come together or have come together, especially for the purpose of expressing their spiritualities, and where there is an involvement of emotions around their needs and desires. It ends up being a place with a lot of emotional energy or emotional charge. The same happens with any other place where human actions have had a great impact, especially on a spiritual or religious level, where many emotions and even brutal acts have taken place, and this leaves marks. This can leave trauma as well, and trauma is a powerful conscious conduit that often prevents many ancestors from moving on. Spirit or conscious force can remain attached to places. It is also a practice to look through the keyhole of the church door every time you go around it, such as looking at the windows as well, as you walk around the church and trying to capture the reflections and shadows that appear on them, and of course interpret the signs. Some folklore practices tell us about walking around the church 7 times, others tell us about 9 times. Whatever the appropriate number, I think we can always try and see what happens. It's a matter of putting it into practice and gaining experience. This, of course, is a subject that I have already elaborated on in other videos, especially those mentioned previously. So I come here today just to remind you that we are, once again, at a time ripe for these type of performances and rituals. I know that since I made the video about Årsgång, some of you have done this every year since then, at least, and have had results, which is great. Well then, carry on. By the way, Midsummer Night and Christmas Night are the best nights to go and to do your year's walk, or so I've heard. New Year's Eve and even at the final day of the year at midnight, while most people are gathered and celebrating, it is also a good time. It puts things into perspective. Well, completely keeping silent, don't eat anything that day, go for a walk, find a place that calls to you, walk backwards around it, 3, 7, 9, 13 times, whatever number seems the most significant to you at that moment and circumstance. Everything shifts, everything comes and goes and comes back again in cycles. As such, certain places at certain times of the year have amplified magical potential. As the folklore of our ancestors tell us, Thursdays and Sundays at twilight or at sunrise are also preferred times to perform magical ritual, and repetition of ritual increases power. Repetition, experience to evolve and to become. Keep it flowing. My dear friends, once again, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being in there. Thank you for your company and friendship and for watching. See you on the next video. And as always, thank you for today. Until we meet again, my dear friends.